The desert had swallowed caravans before, but never with such hunger. For 3 days the merchants staggered across endless dunes, their water flasks emptied, their camels foaming at the mouth. The sun was a merciless tyrant, burning skin raw and warping the horizon into cruel mirages. On the 4th day, just as despair hollowed their eyes, the youngest of them, Nephir, tripped over something hard beneath the sand. He brushed away the grains and froze. It was not stone, not bone, but carved limestone, smooth and deliberate, a block set by human hands thousands of years ago. The others gathered, whispering hoarsely. Their leader, a scarred man named Kemet, struck the sand with his staff until more of the shape revealed itself. A slab, etched with hieroglyphs half buried by centuries. As they cleared it, the image of a serpent coiled around a crown emerged. Beneath it, words carved deep, "Disturb not the rest of the shadow, lest the Nile turn to blood." The air seemed to tighten. Even the wind stopped as if listening. Some urged to leave it buried, but hunger and thirst had already made them reckless. "Where there is warning," Kemet rasped, "there is treasure worth guarding." They dug with frantic hands until the sand slid away, revealing a sealed doorway framed by twin jackal statues, their stone eyes polished black, glinting with unnatural life. The jackals faced inward, not outward, as if trying to hold something inside. When one merchant leaned too close, he swore the carved ears twitched. The sun sank, shadows stretching long across the dune. Against all sense, they pried at the slab. With a groan like an ancient beast awakening, the stone shifted, then fell inward, releasing a blast of air so stale it burned their lungs. It smelled of dust, of copper, of something faintly sweet like blood left too long in the heat. The camels screamed and bolted, tearing their ropes. The men stumbled back, eyes watering, hearts pounding. From the blackness beyond the doorway, a whisper slithered out, too faint to understand, too heavy to ignore. They lit torches. Flames guttered, though no wind stirred. Fear shivered through the group, but greed burned brighter. Kemet raised his torch and stepped forward. "What lies forgotten," he said, "will make us kings." One by one, the others followed him into the dark, leaving the desert silent once more. The doorway yawned like a wound in the earth, and the sand began to creep back as if trying to cover the scar. The passage sloped downward, carved from stone so ancient it seemed to breathe with its own memory. Hieroglyphs lined the walls, not painted but etched so deep they looked fresh, as though the chisel had struck them yesterday. The torchlight flickered across figures of a pharaoh seated upon a throne of shadows, a crown of serpents coiling around his brow. Beneath him, subjects bowed not in reverence but in chains. The deeper they walked, the colder the air grew, until breath misted before their lips despite the desert furnace above. Nephir lagged behind, his torch trembling. He swore he heard echoes not of their footsteps, but of others' feet dragging, whispers in languages no living tongue spoke. When he turned, the darkness behind them pulsed, as though something followed just beyond the torchlight's edge. The merchants muttered prayers under their breath, but each word felt swallowed before it left their lips. Even sound seemed unwilling to linger here. At last they came to a massive stone door set with golden hinges corroded green with time. Across its surface sprawled a warning carved in letters, larger than a man. "The Pharaoh's shadow is not bound by death. Let no living hand release him." The men laughed nervously. To them it was proof. Why guard a tomb so fiercely if not to protect riches beyond imagining? Kemet's eyes gleamed like coins in the torchlight. "Gold fears no ghost," he declared. He pressed his palms against the seam. It took all of them, straining shoulder to shift the slab. When it finally cracked open, the sound was like a sigh escaping the throat of the earth. A blast of air burst forth, not stale but vibrant, humming with something alive. Their torches flared, then dimmed, bending toward the opening as though drawn by unseen breath. From beyond came a low rumble, half wind, half growl. The jackal statues outside groaned faintly, though no man touched them. One merchant screamed and dropped his torch, swearing the hieroglyphs themselves were shifting. The door gaped wide. Before them yawned a stairway descending into deeper dark. A current of whispers rose from below, weaving into words none could comprehend yet all could feel. "Welcome, welcome, welcome." The sound filled their bones, made their teeth ache. Kemet grinned through his fear. "We are chosen," he said. "We are meant to take what lies beneath." His torch wavered, but he stepped first into the stairwell. One by one, greed pressed the others after him, each man swallowed by the dark as if descending into a throat that intended to devour them. The stairs emptied into a hall vast as a temple, its ceiling lost in shadow. Columns rose like petrified trees, each wrapped in carvings of men kneeling before a towering figure whose face had been deliberately chiseled away. The torches hissed and guttered as if the air itself resisted flame. The merchant spread out cautiously, footsteps echoing, though each echo seemed to return distorted, layered with extra steps that were not theirs. When one man clapped his hands nervously, the sound came back like a dozen palms striking in mockery. On the walls, frescoes painted in ochre and gold depicted the life of the forgotten Pharaoh. At first they showed him victorious leading armies, receiving tribute, sitting crowned beneath the sun. But as the story wound deeper, the images darkened. His crown sprouted serpents, his throne bled, his subjects bowed in chains of smoke. The final scene made the men stumble back. The Pharaoh seated upon a black sun, his eyes hollow pits, while red rivers ran through the streets of cities long crumbled to dust. At the bottom of the wall, a single figure had been painted differently, in strokes of fresh crimson that had not faded with centuries. It was a kneeling man, head bent, blood dripping from his mouth. The paint still glistened wet. Nephir dropped his torch. He swore the painted man blinked. Kemet struck him for cowardice, though his own hand trembled. Tricks of the dark, he growled. Yet when he turned, he saw the same figure painted again farther down the hall kneeling, bleeding identical in every detail. Each wall bore him as though he followed them. The merchants began to argue, their voices bouncing strangely, echoes overlapping until it sounded as though a crowd of unseen people surrounded them, whispering, chanting, laughing. Panic clawed their throats. Suddenly the floor shook. Dust rained from the ceiling. The echoes stopped all at once, cut short as though 1,000 mouths closed in unison. The torches flared violently, and from the far end of the hall came the sound of stone grinding against stone. A door was opening not by their hands but by something within. Kemet's face blanched, yet greed refused to let him flee. "Forward," he commanded. "Fortune lies ahead." But as they moved, the fresco's bleeding man seemed to step from the wall. His eyes weeping scarlet, his lips parting to whisper, "Turn back." The new chamber gaped like the throat of a beast, its threshold marked by 2 colossal statues carved from black basalt. They stood as men, yet not as men, their shoulders human, but their faces twisted into jackals, their mouths drawn back in eternal snarls. Their eyes, polished obsidian, seemed to glimmer even without torchlight. The merchants approached cautiously, torches raised. The heat of the flames should have shone on the statues' faces, yet the stone remained cold, shadows refusing to yield. Kemet, ever bold, raised his torch higher. "Guardians," he scoffed. "They are stone, nothing more." But Nephir froze. He swore he saw one eyelid quiver. He swore the black eyes turned to follow his movements. He whispered, "They see us." The others laughed nervously until one of the men reached out, tapping his blade against the statue's leg. The sound rang not hollow like stone, but heavy like bone sealed within iron. The man recoiled, pale. This is no ordinary carving. A heartbeat later, a sound like a low growl shivered through the chamber. The torches flickered and one went out entirely, plunging a corner of the hall into darkness. From that darkness, a bead of crimson slid down the cheek of the left statue, thick as blood. Panic rippled. "It bleeds!" one cried, stumbling back. Kemet struck the man across the face. "Stone cannot bleed." "It is a trick of the light." Yet even his voice faltered. The blood dripped again, splattering on the floor, steaming as it hit the stone. The right statue's jaw seemed to shift, opening slightly as though preparing to speak. But no words came, only the echo of distant footsteps, heavy and deliberate, though none of them had moved. The merchants pushed forward, eager to escape the watching eyes. As they passed, the statues loomed taller, their shadows stretching unnaturally long across the floor. One man swore he felt a stone hand brush against his cloak. Another claimed he heard his name whispered directly into his ear. By the time they reached the next doorway, all of them trembled, their greed thinning into raw terror. Only Kemet forced a grin, though sweat drenched his brow. "Statues guard treasure," he muttered. "The richer the guardian, the richer the prize." He stepped through, but Nephir glanced back once more. The statues had turned slightly. Where once they faced each other, now both stared directly at the men who had dared to trespass. Beyond the guardian stretched a corridor narrower than before, the air thicker, pressing into their lungs like damp cloth. Hieroglyphs on the walls twisted as though alive. their meaning slipping whenever eyes tried to focus. At last they came upon a pair of doors unlike any they had seen towering. Slabs of gold-veined granite, sealed with bands of bronze fused shut by fire. Across them sprawled a warning so large it filled the entire archway. Here rests the Pharaoh's shadow. His body may sleep, but his spirit walks. Disturb him not, for his hunger is endless. The men's torches dimmed as though reluctant to reveal what lay ahead. Some muttered that they had come too far, that even treasure could not buy back a soul lost to curses. But Kemet snarled, spittle flying from his cracked lips. Do you think we bled in the desert to turn back now? Do you think the gods left this door for cowards? Riches beyond imagining wait within. His hands shook as he pressed them to the bronze, blistering from the heat that pulsed faintly through the metal. The others, bound by greed and fear alike, joined him. With straining shoulders, the seals cracked. Bronze split with a shriek. Stone groaned like a beast disturbed in its sleep. The doors shuddered and then opened inward, dust cascading like smoke. From the void beyond, a cold wind exhaled unnatural, too sharp, carrying with it the stench of myrrh mixed with rot. The torches bent forward as if eager to enter, their flames reaching toward the dark. Nephir's knees buckled. He whispered, "It does not want us here. It does not want us alive." Inside lay the Pharaoh's chamber. Gold gleamed in heaps, bracelets, idols, jars encrusted with jewels. The men gasped, dazzled. Their fear ebbed at once, replaced by the fever of greed. They rushed forward, hands clawing at treasures, coins spilling between their fingers. Laughter broke out, wild, desperate, the laughter of men who thought themselves saved. But Nephir did not move. His eyes fixed on the center of the chamber, where a single black sarcophagus stood. Its surface was carved with serpents devouring their own tails, its lid sealed not with mortar, but with thick bands of obsidian. And across it, scrawled in strokes that looked like fingernails gouging stone, were words that had not aged a day. Let him not wake. The world will drown in shadow. The men circled the sarcophagus, their hands trembling with excitement. Gold mattered little now compared to the promise of what lay inside. A pharaoh, Kemet whispered, eyes gleaming. A god among men. His very mask will be worth empires. He pressed his torch closer, its light catching on the obsidian bands. They seemed to shimmer as though wet. He drew his blade, striking at the bindings. Sparks flew, the sound sharp, echoing like a scream that did not belong to the stone. Nephir begged, voice breaking, "Do not! It is not treasure, it is a prison." But greed deafened them. One band cracked, then another. Each shatter sent tremors through the chamber, dust falling in sheets from the ceiling. The jackal statues in the hall behind groaned, the sound carrying into the chamber like thunder. The merchants ignored it, frenzy overtaking fear. At last, with a final heave, the lid shifted. A gust of air burst forth, extinguishing half their torches in an instant. The chamber plunged into darkness, broken only by the eerie glow of the open sarcophagus. Inside lay not a mummified corpse, but a figure that looked untouched by time. Skin dark as polished bronze, lips cracked but not decayed, eyes closed yet restless beneath their lids. Jewelry still gleamed upon his chest. His hands were crossed over his chest, clutching a black stone amulet carved with serpents. For a heartbeat, silence ruled. Then his eyes snapped open. They were not eyes of the dead nor of the living, but voids swirling with red fire. Every torch in the chamber extinguished at once. Darkness fell absolute. In that dark rose a sound that did not belong to lungs or throat, but to the earth itself. A whisper that slithered into every ear at once. "Who disturbs my rest?" The words were not heard but felt, crawling down their spines, filling their mouths with the taste of ash. One man screamed, clutching his chest as blood poured from his lips. Another dropped his gold and fled, only to crash into a wall as if the chamber had shifted around him. The pharaoh sat up, slow, deliberate, each movement cracking the silence like thunder. His gaze swept the intruders, and their torches reignited not with yellow fire, but with black flames that burned without heat. Kemet's voice quavered but did not break. We free you, mighty one. We are your servants now." The pharaoh smiled, thin and cruel, as though the words amused him. "You are not my servants," he whispered. "You are my feast." And with that, the darkness surged like a wave, swallowing their screams whole. The chamber quaked with a rhythm like a heartbeat, though no heart should have beat here. The pharaoh rose fully from his sarcophagus, his amulet glowing like coal in a furnace. His eyes burned holes into the air itself. When he spoke again, his lips barely moved, yet the whisper slithered into every ear. "You have broken the chains. Now the chains are yours." The words coiled through their skulls, leaving pain in their wake. One merchant clawed at his ears until blood ran down his neck. Another fell to his knees, sobbing in a tongue that was not his own. The black torches hissed, their flames twisting into shapes' faces, screaming silently. Hands reaching. Every shadow in the chamber deepened, stretching unnaturally. Nephir clung to the wall, eyes wide, teeth chattering. He felt the whispers not only in his ears but in his bones. A vibration that shook marrow. When he tried to pray, the words dissolved, stolen before they formed. It was as if the Pharaoh devoured sound, devoured hope. The gold scattered across the floor melted into pools, running toward the sarcophagus as though obeying a master's call. Kemet, drunk on greed, forced himself forward. "Great Pharaoh, we bring you freedom. Spare us and we will serve." The Pharaoh turned his gaze upon him. In that instant, Kemet's torch shattered, exploding into black sparks that seared his flesh. He screamed, his skin blistering, his eyes turning red as though bleeding from within. "Serve?" the Pharaoh whispered. "Then serve in silence." And Kemet's voice vanished mid-cry, his mouth opening but no sound escaping. He fell to the floor, still breathing, still writhing, but forever mute. The others panicked. One tried to flee, sprinting toward the door. But the hieroglyphs along the walls writhed, shifting into serpents that slithered from the stone and coiled around his legs. He toppled, dragged screaming into the dark. The Pharaoh laughed softly, a sound colder than silence. "You will not leave. You are my first breath after centuries. You are my blood to drink." The whispers grew louder, until the chamber itself seemed to chant in unison. Nefer pressed his hands over his ears, but the words found him still. "Welcome, welcome, welcome." His vision blurred. He knew then they had not discovered treasure. They had unearthed a hunger older than death itself. The survivors huddled near the far wall, torches spitting black fire. The Pharaoh loomed, not rushing to kill but savoring their terror. His shadow stretched across the chamber, splitting into tendrils that moved like snakes. One by one they slithered toward the men, curling around ankles, throats, wrists. Wherever they touched, skin blistered as if burned by ice. Nephir clutched the wall, praying for courage. His eyes fixed on the amulet the Pharaoh wore, the serpent carved in black stone. Something in him knew. That stone was the heart of this horror. Before he could act, one of the merchants, Pharaoh, betrayed the group. With a cry of desperation, he lunged forward, seizing the amulet from the Pharaoh's chest. For an instant, the shadows recoiled, shrieking, the chamber trembling as though struck by earthquake. The Pharaoh staggered, his fire eyes dimming. The others gasped. Pharaoh grinned, holding the amulet aloft. "It is mine now, power! Power enough to rule kingdoms." But greed blinds. The amulet's glow intensified, cracks splitting across its surface. Blood seeped through his fingers. Not his blood, but the stone's. Pharaoh screamed as the amulet fused into his flesh, serpents of black light wrapping his arm, crawling under his skin. The Pharaoh's laughter returned, low and cruel. "Fool, you think to steal what was forged from my shadow?" He raised a hand and Pharaoh's body convulsed, jerking like a puppet. His eyes turned black, his veins glowing red. In moments his mouth opened, not with his voice, but with the Pharaoh's. "Now you serve me better," the whisper hissed from Pharaoh's throat. His body twisted unnaturally, bones snapping, arms elongating, until he was no longer man but vessel. The amulet pulsed with each beat of the Pharaoh's words. The others fell into chaos. One attacked Pharaoh with a blade, but shadows swallowed the strike, breaking the sword like straw. Another fled toward the hall, only for the statues outside to step forward at last, their obsidian eyes blazing, blocking all escape. Nephir alone clung to his courage, his gaze fixed on the amulet glowing within Pharaoh's chest. He knew what had to be done. Destroy it or none of them would ever leave. But the Pharaoh's laughter thundered louder, echoing through the chamber, shaking stone from the ceiling. "Try, little thief," he taunted. "Try and learn the price of defiance." The chamber shook violently now, dust and shards of stone raining from the ceiling. Columns groaned as cracks split their ancient surfaces. The Pharaoh spread his arms, his shadow stretching until it cloaked every wall. From it poured faces, mouths opening wide, screaming in silence. The guardians outside stepped closer, each stride shaking the ground. The survivors scattered, their sanity unraveling with every heartbeat. Pharaoh no longer himself lunged with shadow-wrapped limbs, striking at those who had once been his companions. His eyes glowed red, his mouth whispering endless curses in the Pharaoh's voice. Nephir dodged, scrambling across the floor slick with melted gold. He seized a fallen torch, its black flame licking his hand without burning. He hurled it at Sahru's chest. The flame clung, flaring brighter where it touched the amulet. Sahru shrieked, his voice layered with the Pharaoh's, the sound rattling bones. For a moment the amulet cracked, light spilling from within. The Pharaoh roared, shadows recoiling, walls trembling harder. "You dare!" he thundered. "You dust-born child defy your god." The merchants who remained alive surged forward, striking at Sahru with desperation. Their blades chipped, their arms broke, but the focus of their rage weakened the amulet further. Cracks spread, red light spilling like blood. Sahru collapsed, writhing, the amulet pulsing violently. Nephir raised a stone idol, smashing it down with every ounce of strength. The amulet shattered. A scream tore the chamber apart, not from Sahru's mouth, but from everywhere. From the air, from the walls, from the very floor beneath them. Darkness burst outward in a wave, flinging men against the stone like rag dolls. The ceiling split. Entire slabs of rock crashed down, crushing gold, statues, men alike. Dust swallowed the chamber. Through the chaos, the Pharaoh's form dissolved, torn into fragments of shadow that shrieked as they fled into the cracks. Sahru's body collapsed, empty, bloodless, nothing more than a husk. The survivors, few and broken, stumbled toward the hall. But the guardians moved at last, raising their stone arms, sealing the exit with thunderous force. Nephir screamed, clawing at the closing gap. As the tomb collapsed in fire, dust, and shadow, silence returned to the desert, broken only by the hiss of sand as it slid over stone. The tomb had sealed itself again, as if nothing had ever disturbed it. The caravan's camels, long gone, wandered aimlessly under the dying sun. Days later, a search party found only rubble, half buried beneath shifting dunes. They said no man could have survived such ruin, and yet one did. Nephir stumbled into the desert, his body broken, his skin blistered. His eyes were wide, his lips cracked, his breath a rasp. He wandered for miles until he collapsed at the edge of an oasis. Villagers found him there, raving of statues that bled, of whispers in the dark, of a pharaoh whose eyes burned like fire. They tended his wounds, but none could soothe his mind. When he slept, he screamed. When he woke, he stared at his shadow as though it belonged to someone else. At first, no one noticed. But as the days passed, the villagers began to whisper. When Nephir stood in the sunlight, his shadow stretched wrong too long, too sharp, its edges rippling like smoke. At night it moved when he did not. Children claimed it whispered their names. One evening, as the sun bled into the horizon, Nephir sat by the fire, silent. The flames flickered wildly, bending away from him. His shadow rose taller, stretching across the sand, and for an instant its eyes burned red. The villagers fled, leaving him alone. He did not call after them. He only smiled faintly, his lips curling as if hearing a voice none else could. The Pharaoh had not remained in the tomb. He had found a new vessel. The desert swallowed the ruins, but the shadow walked free, and in the silence carried on the wind came a whisper that would haunt generations. I am awake.